This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Jason Shiga. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul, and we're two PhDs, or in my case, in progress, talking about comics.
That's right. And on this episode, we have the pleasure of talking with Jason Shiga. His first volume of Demon comes out this week from First Second. But before we get into that fun conversation, we want to let all of you guys know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find extra specials. Sometimes those discounts will be at 45% off cover price. Sometimes those specials will be at 50% off. But often, you can find some discounts that are more impressive than that.
One of the things that you should definitely take advantage of and check out on DCBS are the monthly bundles. They have bundles from DC, bundles from Marvel, often from other publishers. Recently, the Vertigo and Young Animal titles have been in bundles, and so those are kind of can't miss. I always take advantage of those bundles, and I think you should check those out too.
Yeah, great discounts, bundle and otherwise, at Discount Comic Book Service. So check out their website, dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please do send them an email and tell them that Paul and Derek sent you.
That's right.
So, Paul, this was a fun interview we did with Jason Shiga, and I was trying to remember in the course of the conversation how this came about. Now, you were the one who instigated this interview, correct?
Yeah, I've been a fan of his work for a while, and I think it was after he won the Ignatz for Demon last year, not this year, the most recent XPX, but last year, that I thought it would be really fun to have a conversation with him. I was thinking about it for the blog, but I'm really glad that we got him on the podcast.
That's right, because we originally started to discuss this possibility way back in February, and we got in touch with Jason, and he said he would be up for it. He said, but why don't we wait and do it around the time of the publication of the first volume, the hard copy volume of Demon, because as you will learn, if you didn't know already in the course of the interview, we'll mention that it started off as a webcomic.
Yeah, so the delays are actually a sign of the good fortune for the book. It was a webcomic. He published them as mini comics, and then it was sort of so successful. It got picked up by First Second, and they're out soon, or they're out now in these great volumes that you can get.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and start listening to that interview.
All right.
We're happy to have on the Comics Alternative Jason Shiga. His new book, Demon, comes out on Tuesday, October 4th, or at least the first volume of Demon comes out on the 4th. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
That's really good to hear. So you listen to us regularly?
I do.
Wow.
It's it's one of the podcasts that I listen to when I ink.
Well, that's good. I mean, that really makes us feel wanted. And every now and again, we'll hear creators say something similar, that they listen to the podcast, and many times they'll listen as they're working. So, I mean, I feel honored anytime someone shares that. So, thank you.
Aw. Thank you for the podcast.
You know, Jason, we were looking over your website, And one of your most recent notes was that you feel a little empty now that Demon is over with and it's completed. And I think that was posted over a month ago. And since then, you've had some big life changes. You've moved to Angoulême over in France. You moved the family, not just yourself. And you'll be there for the year. So how are you feeling now about Demon? Now, the webcomic is completed, but the book is about to come out. Do you still have that feeling of emptiness?
No, actually, gosh, I have to say I'm more excited now about the book than ever, because it's finally getting the sort of the royal treatment. It's being collected by First Second into these really beautiful square-bound books with two-color printing, just kind of how I'd envisioned it. When I was creating Demon, I guess one of my big inspirations was very early sort of pre-World War II manga. And what I liked about the way a lot of those were printed is that they usually limit themselves to just two colors, usually red and black or blue and black. You can still kind of see the remnants of that in a lot of Fujio works or Miki Tori. They both do work in red and black, and it looks so good when it's when they blend those two colors, and it's a style that I really like when I see on the printed page. And First Second is being incredibly flexible about doing this sort of printing. And I've got preview copies of the book, and they look gorgeous. They're it's definitely the most beautiful of all my comics as just an object. So. Yeah, I'm super excited about the release, which is just coming up in a few days. And who knows, maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, it'll already be out.
That's really interesting, Jason. I had the privilege of kind of hearing about the webcomic pretty early, and followed you on Patreon, as you know, and got to pick up the pamphlets as they were coming out. And I know that the material kind of, the physical shape of books is something that matters to you a lot, because you've done in the past with works like Meanwhile and Fleep a lot of formal experimentation. And so it's interesting for me that for somebody who, the way that a book looks and feels and the way that you hold it and interact with it is so important, that you've actually moved this story through so many different formats, right? Webcomic and pamphlets and now the book. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, along that process, some of your thinking and some of the concerns that you had that came up as you were thinking about publishing on the web or, risograph or now in this First Second.
Right. So I guess this First Second edition is actually, I guess it would be the third sort of format change for the book, which I guess originally started off as little mini comics that I printed up on my risograph, and then I released as a webcomic, it's really interesting to follow this story through all the different format changes. But I guess, before I get into this, I should probably tell your listeners a little about the story of Demon.
Right, yes. Yeah, set a little context.
Which I don't want to spoil too much, because there's a lot of twists and turns in the story. But the sort of the basic premise of the whole story is that there's this fella. He's an actuary from Oakland. He checks himself into this filthy motel room in Oakland, and he hangs himself from the ceiling fan, only to discover that he cannot die for some reason. No matter what method of suicide he tries, he miraculously wakes up in bed just minutes later or seconds later, and I guess the rest of the book is trying to figure out what's going on, why is it happening, and then when he does, using this sort of I guess you could call it a superpower or whatever to his own advantage, and basically becoming the most powerful human on the planet.
Yes.
Well, where did the idea come for Demon?
Well, it's a little embarrassing to talk about, but I've always been a huge fan of this TV show called Quantum Leap. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
Scott Bakula.
Yeah, there's Scott Bakula. The premise of the show is this guy travels through time, but the way he does it is super interesting, which is instead of traveling through time as himself, he basically inhabits the body of some random person in history. So I was always drawn to that premise of there's always a scene in every episode where he looks at himself in the mirror and he's like he's a woman, or he's 4 feet tall or something. Yeah, I've always been drawn to that premise, or sort of body switching comedies from the 80s, like Vice Versa, 18 Again.
Yeah. Freaky Friday or something like that. Yeah.
Really, yeah. If you want to really go back, I think Freaky Friday was probably the one that started it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that premise, and yeah, I always felt it should be explored a little more. Sort of, I don't know, Death Note style. I'm also a huge fan of Death Note.
Oh yeah.
Basically any sort of narrative where there's like a very very simple premise that the characters explore every single corner and possibility of. So in the case of Demon, it's actually two people or two sort of rivals who are trying to figure out all the implications of the premise in this case.
Yeah. Whenever I describe the book to people, I always, after explaining the premise, they may have the impression that it's a very dark and somewhat horrific story. The idea of somebody who commits suicide and is a sort of demon that resurfaces in someone else's body. And I immediately have to show them three things. One, the style of your art, which is, sort of very cartoony, and everybody is composed of circles. And second, I tell them that you're very much a mathematician. And third, I describe the kind of cat and mouse detective story that it is, because I think it really those details kind of round out the kind of story that it is. It's a lot of fun, actually, despite how dark it might sound initially.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were talking about the story's genesis as a webcomic, and I don't know if you remember, Jason, but we discussed back in December of 2014 Demon on our monthly webcomic episode. And in fact, December of 2014 was the very first time that we did a webcomic episode. It was the inaugural episode for that series, and one of the comics that we discussed on that show was Demon. And at the time, it was current and ongoing, relatively early stages. Now on the site, if readers go to shigabooks.com, they could read the first chapter of Demon. You've left that up. But even though the webcomic is completed, you've taken that down now. So you started as a webcomic. at the very beginning, were your plans to turn this into a print publication?
Yeah. So I should probably talk a little about the sort of publication history of Demon, which is kind of interesting. I'd actually for most of my life, or most of my career, I'd always been kind of a webcomic skeptic. So I'd usually, someone would point me in the comic or in the direction of a webcomic, and I'd usually, check out, or usually, well, I don't know if you covered this in your podcast, but a lot of times it's kind of, it's a bit overwhelming because, first of all, there's a lot of webcomics. And there's no, it doesn't seem like there's a comics journal for webcomics. There's no, it's you're just kind of thrown in the deep end with all these literally thousands of webcomics. You don't know which ones are the good ones or the popular ones, and you just kind of wade through them, and it's a bit overwhelming. But I'd say another impediment for me getting into webcomics is for the longest time I just didn't like reading comics on a monitor. After I got a tablet, it's actually a joy to read comics on a tablet, like on on like a little portable screen that I can, bring to the bathroom. So that was kind of the tipping point for me, where I started actually really enjoying webcomics. And when I was first starting to publish the mini comics for Demon, I thought, since that's what all the crazy kids are doing these days, I dip my toe in and start putting up pages online as well. And it became a webcomic as well, which is funny because I'd say at the end of the day, the webcomic was probably much more popular than the mini comics that I made. In terms of, every time I meet someone who says that they're a fan or they've read Demon, it's usually through the webcomic and not through the mini comic.
Yeah, I've read more of Demon in the bathroom than I care to disclose.
So now you're, I guess, a convert to webcomics, at least as a reader. Do you see yourself doing another project that begins as a webcomic? Or maybe even something exclusively a webcomic?
I definitely want to do another webcomic, but it's I don't think I could ever do something that's exclusively a webcomic. I'm still kind of I don't know. I'm still an old fogey in that way. I need I feel unless something exists as a physical object, it just does not exist.
Well, one of the reasons why I ask about maybe a text that is webcomics exclusive is, and we can talk about this with some of your other work, such as Meanwhile. You like to experiment with narrative. You like to experiment with the way that we engage with a story in ways that can be manipulated. And I think that online comics are perfect for that. In other words, it allows you to do things, and not necessarily with multimedia, but definitely multimedia could be a part of it, that a reader could get different story experiences depending on how they engage with the digital text. So I thought that may be something that would very much appeal to you, that you can't get in the same way from print, even though, you did quite a bit with that with Meanwhile.
Right. So there's I guess I've done a ton of interactive comics, you could call them. Although it's funny because it's not what someone would normally think of when they think of interactive comics. Most of the interactive comics I've done are actually, I think all the interactive comics I've done are books. They're not, apps or video games. I guess my inspiration for those were the sort of choose your own adventure books or fighting fantasy books from my childhood, and I guess I'd say about half of the comics I've made are interactive. And when I first started making comics, one of the first things I did was start making choose your own adventure style comics. And I've always tended to shy away from incorporating computers into those, just because I felt how can I how can I put this without offending anyone? But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big video game person. I'll put it that way. I've always just loved the physical object, and for me the getting choices into a narrative, it doesn't seem like it's that difficult to do on paper. Edward Packard was doing it in since the 80s, so I'm not sure that computers would help me that much. For me, I guess the biggest challenge with creating interactive comics is just all the content generation. If you're writing a story and it splits off into two branches, then you have to write and draw both of those branches. And if those two branches have split off into two more branches, you're basically doubling your workload every time, just to get one page longer in the average story. So yeah, I don't really see computers helping me out with that issue. So I've always kind of shied away from it, but recently I have been experimenting a little with incorporating comics and computers. I did recently something at the Ann Arbor District Library that incorporates comics and a little Arduino microcontroller. And then I guess there's a Meanwhile app that people can buy. That's basically kind of Scott McCloud's vision of an infinite canvas. It's all the pages and panels from Meanwhile kind of exploded onto one giant canvas that that readers can kind of navigate.
Yeah, it's cool to hear about that because I was curious how this would come off as a podcast. Computers and all the digital stuff allows us to have a conversation between Dallas, the West Coast here, and you over there in France. So there's all these great things that come with webcomics and digital access and all that kind of stuff. But to me, you miss a lot of the Jason Shiga experience by not, I was lucky enough to meet you at Alternative Press Expo here in the Bay Area. And there's so much of what you do that you just have to touch. If somebody finds your book Meanwhile on the bookshelves, which Abrams published, there's all these tabs that lead you from one place to another. And it's kind of like the physical exploration of that book that makes it so much fun. And I know that you've exploited that a lot in your work and experimented a lot with that in your work. So it's interesting to see, I can understand that as you approach web, you really are thinking about like, how do we expand this to make it a kind of interactive object as much as possible?
Right. Yeah. I'd say, in favor of computers, I'd say one aspect of computer computer-based comics that I can envision helping a lot is basically it's hard to think of a way to describe this, but if you've ever played text adventure games, one thing I really like is when your character has sort of an inventory, and you can go around dungeons like in Zork and pick up keys, and if you have some objects, then they allow you to access to other rooms or other objects, and you can combine objects in interesting ways. Up until now, I felt there was no real way to sort of replicate that experience with paper interactive comics. But recently, I feel that I've stumbled on a way to actually incorporate memory, save states into a paper book. And it's very exciting. I experimented a little with this with one of my earlier books called Hello World. But right now, while I'm in France, I'm working on a 500-page choose your own adventure comic that will have an automatic memory system. It'll almost be like a computer. It'll have memory that the reader can put things into and take things out of. And I'm really excited about this project. But it's you just have to see it. It's really difficult to describe.
And this is what you were hitting about on your website, right?
Yes. It's basically what I came here to France to do. I applied for a residency here, and and I got a year residency. I moved the whole family out here, my wife, my kid, and I'm working on this crazy book. You would not believe the shape of this thing if I showed it to you. It's got 3 spines. It's bonkers. But,
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love everything about this residency. It's amazing here, and I'd encourage any cartoonist listening to inking right now to come and apply.
That's interesting in that lately, I mean, over the past several months, we've had a number of other creators on the show who have done the residency in Angoulême. And I'm curious, how did you come about this? What was the process of application?
Well, luckily, Sarah Glidden wrote a really great blog post about the whole process. It was like a FAQ, and it was, without that, I would have been completely lost. But, it's really just a matter of filling out a application form, sending in a little proposal, and seeing what happens. There's I think there's a few Americans who've done it. Sarah Glidden, Matt Madden, Jessica Abel are kind of the famous ones, and I really have to thank Matt Madden and Jessica Abel because they were the first family to do the residency. They actually brought their children, and it kind of paved the way for folks like me who are able to bring a family. Otherwise, it's it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's tough, getting residencies. It's tough enough getting residencies as some single person with no attachments. But yeah, it's been great. The organization here has been fantastic. They set us up with with this huge apartment for our family, and they've been super generous. The preschools here are free, believe it or not. And
it's great.
Yeah, it's just a great deal. I'm just gonna go off on a little tangent here, but
that's okay. We like tangents.
Yeah, proceed.
My son, my 3-year-old son today, came home from school, and he said he ate the chicken at lunch. So I was like, oh, that's I'm glad you're eating. I'm glad you're eating lunch, not just picking at the bread or whatever. But I looked at the school menu. They have it posted in the window of the school. He was actually eating rabbit with mustard.
Oh.
And yesterday he was eating veal, apparently. He also thought that was chicken.
That's great.
Did you tell him that he was actually eating a bunny rabbit, a cute little bunny?
No, I'll just let him continue to believe he's eating chicken.
That's very kind of you as a father. When I was a kid, one of the things my father did on the side, he was a barber professionally, but he also for a while raised rabbits. And so we used to raise rabbits as either pets or fryers. And so when my brother and I were old enough, he gave us a rabbit to take care of. So those were our pets. And they were in different pens than, let's say, the rabbits that he would use for this hobby. And one day I remember sitting down to dinner, and you could probably anticipate where this is going to go. I sat down to dinner, and, it was often that we would have chicken, especially fried chicken, growing up in the South. So we sat down. I was eating what I thought was really good chicken, and my mother and father looked at me as I was eating in a way that was unusual, and I said, well, what's the matter? And they said, that's actually the rabbit. And I can't remember my pet rabbit's name. It's been too many years. But they told me that I was eating my pet. So I just started to eat so quickly that they didn't prepare me for this. And it was mildly traumatic.
Oh, my goodness.
I bet. That sounds like the ending of Old Boy. That sounds horrible.
Yeah. It's not as bad as, let's say, the ending of Old Yeller, but...
Gee, why? Oh my gosh, why would he do that?
I guess my pet was old enough, and it was his time.
Oh.
Or maybe her time. I can't remember if it was a he or a she bunny, but I like the bunny.
Oh man, that sounds horrible.
You never know the twists and turns of conversation on the Comics Alternative. Who would have thought we'd be talking about eating bunnies at the start of this talk?
Wow, wait, so how did you recover? How did anyone in your family recover from that?
Well, I think my brother was okay. I don't know if he had started to eat yet, but I felt bad that meal. I don't remember the emotional impact after that. Now, it could be that I am psychologically blocking it, but I think it's more likely that after the meal and that upsetting experience, it wasn't so upsetting to where I carried it into the next day, because you know how kids' attention spans are.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess it hurt me enough to where I remember, but it didn't scar me. At least I don't think. Who knows?
Oh man.
But I guess getting back to something a little more pleasant.
Let's see how the segment goes.
Yeah. Like a dark turn.
Yeah. So something that also includes, I guess, quite a bit of killing is your new book, Demon, Volume 1. And as you point out in the foreword to the print edition, that you're using a character that you've used before in a previous book, meanwhile, Jimmy Yee. And I'm wondering why the decision to use Jimmy from Meanwhile in Demon.
Well, I'll give you two answers. The first answer that I tell everyone is that I'm actually a big Tezuka fan, and one thing that I liked about his work is he used a star system where he would recycle character designs. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. The main character from one of his books might show up as a villain or a side character in another one of his books. And he basically cast his comics like they were movies. He had his George Clooney that he would always use. And I've always liked that system, and it's something that I've done myself. There's versions of Jimmy Yee going back 20 years back to my earliest comics. But I'll give you another reason, which is actually the real reason, because the first reason I gave you was bogus. And the real reason is it's really difficult to come up with new character designs. I don't think of myself as a natural artist. There's only so many permutations of circles and squares and angles that I can rearrange on a character's face. So it's always tough for me to come up with new character designs, and when I do, a lot of the times they'll change drastically after 20 or 30 pages. So when I was making Demon, I wanted to make sure that I drew a character that I knew I could draw would sustain itself through 700 pages without changing that much. And of course, Jimmy Yee was the natural choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was Jimmy in Bookhunter as well, or a version of him?
A version of him was in Bookhunter. He had a different haircut. He had a little comb over back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things Jimmy lets you do is to really kind of focus on the problem at hand. And to me, the heart of Demon is actually the sort of puzzle problem that it presents. The narrative puzzle that you have. This idea that he can die and find himself in another body, and so it becomes sometimes a logistical or mathematical, almost puzzle of how to survive, or eventually kind of how to conquer the world, right? as a kind of problem. I guess I see a parallel between the way you think about books formally and the experimentation you can do with the format of a book, and what you're doing with the narrative. You're doing a lot of kind of solving puzzles and problems with it. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan and design a story like Demon?
So it's I guess I don't know. I've always ever since I was a kid, I've loved puzzles, little games, exploring rule sets. When I was at university, mathematics was the my natural sort of field of study. Mm-hmm. That I ended up choosing, and it's always something I found fun. Even to this day, I'll read little recreational math books to try to keep my mind sharp. And I guess I try to approach narrative in the same way. with Demon specifically, you might guess that I had to write a lot of it backwards, coming up with sort of the endings and then working my way backwards from there. Once I had the sort of initial premise nailed down, yeah, there's all sorts of geometry and strategy, and I just love that stuff. I eat it up. One of my sort of non-comics influences. I don't know if either of you have read this book, but there's a fantastic sort of science fiction book called Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which also takes a very simple premise. The idea that this guy gets turned invisible and explores every single possible corner of the of how this could turn out.
Right.
Like one of the things that I never even thought about until I read this book was if someone was invisible, their eyelids would also be invisible. So when they close their eyes, they're still seeing. They're seeing everything.
Right.
So yeah, it's full of just like these little details like that. We're like, oh yeah, that's right. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that sort of stuff. I guess most recently, I don't know if you either of you read The Martian, but I love that book.
Oh,
That's probably, one of my favorite sci-fi books in the past decade.
Yeah.
But it's basically structured kind of around a series of puzzles.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, and that reminds me a little of Quantum Leap too, the sense where you're in a situation where you have to kind of, as they say in the Martian movie, you have to science the hell out of the situation to get yourself out of it. It reminds me actually of, I'm a big fan of Dick Tracy. I don't know if that's at all in your inspiration or background, but Chester Gould used to create these elaborate death traps, and sometimes he wouldn't even know how he was going to get himself out of it, but that was the whole fun, right, in the storytelling is how to get Tracy out of this death trap. And I see that a lot in Demon, that kind of puzzle.
Yeah. No, there's there's that scene where Sweet Pea's hanging upside down over a vat of what you think is acid. There's a candle in the room, and yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I noticed, Jason, in going back and looking at the parts of the webcomic, or the parts of Demon that are still available online, again, Chapter 1, I wanted to see if you had made any change in the pages or the page layout going from, let's say, the webcomic to the print, wondering if, now we have a different platform here, you may move things around a bit. But from what I could see, the layout from page to page or from installment to installment on the webcomic is laid out the exact same way as in this first volume, just out from first second. And I'm wondering if you were tempted in any way to change any part of the webcomic, translating that, so to speak, into print form. There's a few things. There's a few things that I changed from the webcomic to print form. But I guess the way I made Demon, I guess it's a little unusual for cartoonists, which is I actually penciled the whole thing first. I penciled all 700 pages of it. So by the time that I was inking it and putting it up online, it was pretty much the comic that I wanted. If there's, when I was done with the pencils, of course, if there's something that I wanted to change earlier on, it was easy to do while it was still in pencil stage. So once I had it sort of hammered down with inks, there wasn't a whole lot more that I wanted to change. But
the perceptive reader would probably notice a few differences here and there between the web, the mini comic, and the first second version. They're all slightly different, but not super dramatically so.
And you mentioned the mini comic, and one of the things that you had done before recently is to sell those through your website, but now those are no longer available, correct?
That's right. Well, I mean, a large part of the reason is I'm in France now. There'd really be no way for me to get those out to my readers.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know if that was a requirement that First Second had.
I don't think it was, but I think just out of courtesy, it's probably better not to sell a competing product that my own publisher is putting out.
So not because I was asking about the layout. Anything with the story that you may have been tempted to change going from webcomic to print format, and not because one platform gave you something that another one may or may not have, but that you had a change of heart of where the story was going. In other words, the story that was originally online on the webcomic is the story that we'll eventually going to get in several volumes through First Second.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that in a really tongue-in-cheek way, you would joke that these pamphlets would be priceless. To your supporters, you'd write, "They'll be worth millions," and maybe they will be now. Now that they're a true rarity, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think there's probably only around 250 of each issue. So if you've got one, hold on to it, and maybe in 20 years you can sell it on eBay for $1 million.
Well, darn it, I missed the boat on that. And I have to tell you, I started reading it as a webcomic, and I didn't get the mini comics, but I would keep up with it fairly regularly. I read a lot of comics, webcomics and otherwise, and so I whenever we, let's say, discuss a webcomic on our monthly webcomic series, I'm kind of selective. I mean, I may like it, but I may not necessarily come back to it after we discuss it and keep up with an ongoing comic. Demon, on the other hand, I did. I did keep up with that fairly regularly for a while, but then I got the feeling, reading it about, I don't know, once a week or sometimes twice a week, depending, and getting caught up, I said, I want more story chunk. So I made a conscious decision to just wait for a while and read them in larger rounds of acquiring the story. But I didn't get around to finishing it, so I guess now I'm being forced to wait for a larger chunk.
Oh no!
Well, no, that's good. I'm glad I didn't read everything through on the web.
Yeah, well, I'm sad you didn't didn't read everything on the web when it was all still up. I guess there was only maybe a 4-month sweet spot where you could have done that. But yeah, it was actually, I guess, the original vision of Demon was that it would it would just be like an old serial comic. You may have noticed each sort of chapter or issue ends on a cliffhanger where as a reader you're thinking, oh crud, I have to wait another month to find out what happens next. So that's something I've always enjoyed about comics or serialized narrative of the past. I mean it's it's called a cliffhanger because of those old movie serials. But
yeah.
But yeah, it's that would have been sort of the preferred format or that I'd want people to read it. But But yeah, in fact, if you're gonna buy a volume, the volumes from First Second coming out next week, I'd encourage people to read the first chapter, then wait a month, and then read the second chapter. A month break between each chapter.
Well, and the first, second volumes, there's going to be 3 total. Is that right?
4.
4. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great formal achievements to me of Demon, because you get a sense that you, like, as you said, you penciled the whole thing. Like, this is definitely going somewhere with an end in mind. But it also, part of the premise of the story being that Jimmy can sort of live forever, it has the potential of going on forever. And I don't want to spoil anything, but as the story goes on, even the ennui of living forever becomes kind of part of the theme, right? What do you do with yourself if you keep resurrecting? And so I think you do some really interesting things with the idea of a story being able to go on and on and on, and how do you culminate it, if that's the idea.
Right. It's, yeah, no, I guess, I guess if there's a theme to Demon, that would be it. The meaning of life, as pretentious as it sounds. What is it? Once you have all your sort of basic life necessities taken care of, what is it that makes life enjoyable and worth living?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode.
I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone.
What was that episode with? It was one of the ones with Burgess Meredith that he was, or at least maybe Burgess Meredith played the devil, right? That granted eternal life to another character, and he couldn't kill himself. Am I remembering correctly?
I think that's right. I remember that.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that one. I gotta check that one out. Well, my favorite Burgess Meredith one was the one where he's in a bank vault when the nuclear apocalypse happens.
Oh yeah.
And he walks out and he's like, finally, all the time in the world to read every book I want, and then he steps on his glasses. And he's like, fuck. Wait, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
He's like, fuck. But yeah, what I loved about that one is there is absolutely no moral to this. It was just, there's nothing to be learned. It was just like, fate is a bitch. There's nothing you can do about it. The universe will just kick you in the nuts for no reason. The end.
That's a great summation of the Jason Shiga philosophy of life. The universe will kick you in the nuts. There is a part of Demon, though, where at least as a motivator or as a driver, there's some sentiment, right? There's a, I don't want to spoil again, but there's kind of a core relationship. I'm always interested in how emotions and relationships come up in your stories. Like Empire State is very, I think very centered on relationships and feelings, whereas other ones feel like I said, math problems. I wonder in your process of thinking up the story of Demon, how that came into play, how you use the relationships that Jimmy does have or that other characters do.
Right. It's, I'm tempted to lie and say all these emotions come from my personal life and putting them out there on the page, but you can easily fact check that this is a lie because I previously mentioned that my son is 3 years old and also that I completely penciled the entirety of Demon over 3 years ago. So it's so that's a lie that I easily get caught in. The truth of the matter is the central relationship of Demon is lifted out of one of my favorite movies of all time, Commando, with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Huh. That's great.
If you remember in that movie, he has a daughter that he loves very much, and will do anything to protect her. which I always found very moving, especially at the end when he throws that steel pipe through Bennett, and it pierces his stomach and goes to the boiler behind him, and steam shoots out of the pipe. And, Melissa Milano is clapping her hands in joy. So I guess I should just confess right here on the podcast that it was that that a lot of the relationships and twists were inspired by my favorite movie and perhaps the greatest movie of all time,
Commando. Well, there you go, a comics alternative exclusive.
Right.
We get the breaking news here on this podcast.
That's right. Call the press.
Okay, so there are going to be 4 volumes to this, and from what I've seen, at least on Amazon, Volume 2 of Demon is due out in February. Is that correct?
That's right. There's basically 1 volume every book season, so every 4 months for 1 year. So so when you're finished with 1 volume, you can put in your Amazon order for the next one, and over the course of 1 year, read the entirety of Demon.
So maybe by this time next year, or around this time, I guess, we will have Volume 4 coming out.
That's right.
Wow, good. We don't have to wait too long then.
Well, in a sense, that's how I wrote Demon to be read. Instead of I didn't write it to be read in one big gulp. I wanted it to be read over the course of a year.
And as you said, you're currently right now working on that 500 some page interactive comic. Is the title, or at least the working title, still The Box?
Working title still The Box.
Okay. And any idea about when that might be completed? Will it be completed while you're over there for the year in Angoulême?
I'm hoping to get it all penciled by the time I leave France, and then when I get back, I'm gonna start work on inking.
And are you one of those creators who willingly takes on smaller tasks in the midst of doing longer books?
I am not such a creator. I've done it. I've attempted to do it. I think I did a page of X-Men while I was working on Demon, but it's I have the opposite of ADD. It's when my mind locks on something, it's hard for me to focus or do much of anything else.
Well, definitely, get the work done there in Angoulême on this box project, and then we'll certainly look forward to the next 3 volumes of Demon. But congratulations on the first one coming out this week.
Thank you so much.
From First Second, and thank you especially for being on the Comics Alternative podcast.
Oh, it was an honor.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Oh, thank you too.
Hey, that was a lot of fun. I've been reading Shiga for a while, and it's great to actually talk with him. And then, no matter how many times I do this interview show, the first time I talk with a creator, someone whose work I, very much love, it's always a fun experience. I feel like a little kid almost.
Yeah. And Jason is an incredibly generous person, and he's got a great sense of humor, so I always enjoy hearing from him and talking to him.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And our listeners definitely have to pick up that first volume of Demon, which comes out this week from First Second. Now, unfortunately, you cannot find Demon, at the moment at least, through Discount Comic Book Service, but you can find other great comics there. Go to dcbservice.com. They're the sponsors of the show, and there's a reason why they sponsor this show. We use them. They got great deals. You should use them as well. But you can also get Jason's books, Demon and otherwise, through Amazon and help out the Comics Alternative by doing so. And in fact, go to comicsalternative.com/Amazon and click on that link. It'll take you to Amazon. Do a search for Jason Shiga. Buy as many Jason Shiga books as you can, and the Comics Alternative gets a little cut. So that helps out Jason, that helps out us, and it takes away a few cents from Bezos.
We don't mind that.
That's right. And after you do read Demon Volume 1, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our interview with Jason. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message from the comfort of your own computing device through SpeakPipe, which is really easy to use. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
If you want to reach us by email, you can email us at twoguys@comicsalternative.com. To reach out to me specifically, I'm Paul at comicsalternative.com. And Derek?
I am Derek at comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over social media, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube, and a few other places as well. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, you can listen to us through Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, edited by Paul, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com. So there are a lot of ways of getting in touch with us, and we do like to hear from you.
Do get in touch, and thanks for listening.
That's right, and we have more interviews lined up in the days to come, so check back for those. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul.
See you later.